All good.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Manhattan Community Board 4's Executive Committee meeting for January 2023. My name is Jeffrey LaFrancois. I'm the chair of the board, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. We are meeting on the squares by authority given to us under the executive order of the powers of the mayor. Just so everybody knows, that executive order was just extended now through the middle of February. I feel like this is part of my broken record report, but we will give it as it comes our way. All of this is being streamed to our YouTube channel and made readily available to the public. And additional copies can be requested from the board office as well. We'll be taking up our items in the agenda as presented. I do have a couple of new business items as well. Leslie will be giving a brief report on some of the coastal resiliency meetings that she's been attending. I'd like to talk about a bylaws working group and also discuss the framework for a potential gambling and casino discussion on the west side and how we might begin positioning ourselves as the board on that. Does anybody else have any other additional items of new business they'd like to have brought up this evening?
I have one old new thing, Jeffrey.
Sure.
You want to bring it up now?
Or just introduce the topic and then we'll bring it up in full later.
Yeah, sure. 2.5 years ago, this board sent a letter to various electeds in the NYPD about the mistreatment of one of our residents, Derek Ingram. And we've never gotten a single response. And since then, all the electives have turned over. Okay. So I was thinking about re-upping.
Well, perfect. We'll flesh it out at the end. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to dive right into item one, which is Chelsea Land Use and the Health, Housing, and Human Services Committee. And they're really doing a phenomenal job of tackling the Chelsea Bayview facility on West 20th Street and 9A. You'll recall late last year in the fall, we began getting indications from ESD, the State's Development Corporation, about the interest of moving this forward. The redevelopment of Bayview was announced with the Penn Station project as mitigation. However, we're taking this up as a totally separate standalone project. This was talked about at the December meetings of CLU and HHHS, as well as their January meeting. And tonight we are reviewing and adopting the recommendations for a letter to come out of the joint committees and exec as well. So Jessica, Terry, Joe, Maria, pass it over to you guys for a summary. Jessica, are you able to chat with us tonight?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everyone. Sorry. Recovering from the flu, which is no joke. So everyone wash your hands. As Jeffrey said, our two committees have been taking this topic up, not just at our January meeting, but at our December meeting as well. There have been a number of meetings and discussions happening in between those conversations. Certainly Joe has been, working the phones and making sure that everyone is informed on what we're doing and what the plans are going forward. We heard really specific feedback from each of our committees with land use. Carrie led an amazing discussion on Tuesday, really focused on what are the land use issues that we want to be sure are included in the RFP and prioritized. And so you can see those in the letter that's specific to preservation issues, as well as, limiting the amount of building that will take place on the property. And then, of course, we heard, both of our committees, housing and CLU, share in our commitment to a community space and ensuring permanently affordable, 100% affordable housing, as well as room for the psychiatric beds. Jeffrey mentioned there was also this move to distinguish this from the GPP, and so we want to be sure that that's really highlighted here in the letter, that this project move forward and is not a reflection of a quid pro quo or any kind of endorsement of the plan as it stands now, but rather an important conversion that needs to take place, or important asset that needs to be brought online to address the affordable housing crisis that we face now. So in the letter is in the draft in the Dropbox is really a draft of all of those comments. You can see them, bulleted out there. I think was also added something that Joe's team sent over, which is just a more concise, direct summary of the conversations that happened at each of the meetings. Obviously, the letter has a lot to still be fleshed out with regards to additional detail on the site and conversations with ESD, et cetera, but we think gives you a pretty good understanding of where we're netting out on this issue. Carrie did a great job leading this discussion on Tuesday, so I want to be sure that she can add to this. And also, of course, this came up at housing, and Joe has really been in the weeds on this. So I'll stop there and turn it over to you, Carrie, and then Joe, if there are more specific things you want to add. But honestly, I think this is it's a great opportunity. We've been excited about this. I think this is pretty clear cut. Carrie?
Thanks. I'm not sure I have a ton more to add. I think, it may seem like a lot, but it's pretty comprehensive, these bullet points. We had a bit of a moment right before Chelsea land use this last week, where it looked like there was some momentum against this project because of the Penn Station GPP. So I just want to sort of reiterate Jessica's point that we need to really be very clear in our letter about decoupling them. And then when decoupled, it does feel like there's an incredible amount of support for every, request that we're making in the RFP. So I think that's amazing. And, this is the majority of what you see bulleted out are what's already been presented at full board last month. So it's just got some extra points that came up at land use and at housing. But the majority of it's already been, no, it's just already been, debated and I think approved in theory. Thanks.
That's part of the point. We've taken this up a couple of months in a row to make sure it's a thorough process. Joe?
Yeah, so thank you, Jessica and Carrie. I have been working the phones on this to make sure people get together on it. First, Maria and I met with Dr. Van Yu from CUCS, the Center for Urban Services, the main service provider for Breaking Ground, 2 weeks ago. He's the one who helped us craft what the staffing pattern should be specifically for the portion of the building that will be for residential psychiatric beds. He was fantastic and has offered to continue to work with our board to develop this further and work with ESD. That was a precursor to a meeting that I was called by ESD and HCR to meet with them last week before the Chelsea meeting to really try to explain again the issue of the psychiatric beds and how it could be staffed. And again, they told me this program doesn't exist. And I said, we know it doesn't. That's why we want to put it in place. They, after that discussion with the detail, offered to set up a follow-up meeting now and bring in the State Office of Mental Health. So we're starting to move ahead on this. I also had after the Chelsea land use meeting, I got reached out from Board 5 from their land use people, specifically about the decoupling from Penn Station, the Empire Station General Project Plan. And they now understand that this is not part of that plan, and I don't expect any further discussion from them on that. It was a very thorough discussion. The last thing is I did follow up with Senator Hoylman and Assemblymember Simone regarding additional dollars for the community center portion of this. We know this project is very expensive. It's historic preservation plus affordable housing plus a psychiatric component plus a community facility, and it's not going to be. There needs to be more money coming in, and both of them are interested in working with the board to make funds available for that purpose. So today we gave you an outline of a letter, which we have to work together into a real letter by Friday. We know it's complex, but I think what I found remarkable was in the Chelsea land use meeting where there were other items, specifically the street closure on 22nd Street and the dog run, people who were there about those items spoke in favor of Bayview, which was a remarkable thing to have them come out of the blue and say they're in favor. So I think we're in a good spot. Plus, of course, the Fulton Houses Tenant Association is very in favor of this because of the community facility component. Thanks.
You're talking about at the full board public session when folks.
Oh, I'm sorry. But
that's okay. After they heard our public hearing on it, they endorsed the idea.
Right. Yeah. Was it the full board that where the
Yes.
where the dog run came up?
It was the full board.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's
Thank you,
okay.
Jeffrey. There's been a lot of Bayview meetings.
Yep. Okay, well,
And dog
Maria,
run
did you have
meetings.
anything to add? Maria, did you have anything to add?
Oh, no.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Dale, and then I have a question too.
I think most of it's been addressed. My question was about the decoupling, and it seems to me that it's largely based in public perception of the project. Is there like a funding component, or it's largely about not having it associated with a very unpopular, like a project that has like a grassroots movement against it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to a lot of folks in Chelsea. They thought there was a funding component, and I said clearly,
Right.
There is zero funding coming from the GPP. And then the second thing is, when I spoke to Board 5, they were under the impression Bayview was in the GPP as an element. It is not, period.
Right.
It was thrown in as a discussion, and now it's out of life of its own.
Okay, great.
I have it speaks to the quality of the discussion and the transparency of it all in that. I think we're only recommending 5 days of a psychiatrist on site. Shouldn't we just say 7? We are saying there's going to be psych beds. I mean, if we're setting our baseline for responses here, and I know I'm being super particular, I just was sort of like, is that a recommendation because that's what the hospitals told us to do, or just because that's sort of the work week? I'm just curious.
So from Dr. Van Yu, the chief medical officer at CUCS, he recommended the LPNRN 7 days a week and access to a psychiatrist on the other 2 days. But at the facility, I think as we get through this, Jeffrey, we're going to get it even. Not all the notes have quite made it into this outline, but thank you for bringing that up because that was the intent.
Right, because I know we're kind of creating something in a way. So I just wanted to make sure we're trying to push as far as we can because it's the baseline. Okay, any other questions for this CLUE HHHS letter? Great, I'll take a motion to approve. Dale?
Motion to approve.
What about the public? What about the public?
Oh, do we have anybody that, you're right. I didn't even check on hand. Anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this? I don't see any hands. Sorry about that. Thank you, Joe. Okay, Dale, that was a motion to approve. Did I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any objections? Present, not eligible? Abstention? Excellent. The letter passes unanimously out of exec. Bravo, everybody. And great job to the committees and to a whole lot of work between when this was announced and here it is. And hopefully this is the last time we talk about an idea at Bayview and this becomes a reality. So thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to item 2. You'll recall that it was the beginning of last year, we constituted a working group on the adult use of cannabis. And we are tonight entertaining recommendations based on the rules and guidelines set forth by the Office of Cannabis Management. Jesse Greenwald, who is the chair of that working group, is not able to attend tonight. So I'm passing over to Jesse Bodine and Frank for any light additions that can be provided. Jesse?
Hi. Yeah, the draft letter was in your Dropbox, so please take a look if you haven't already. Jesse and the group had been meeting regularly throughout the year and sort of used the same system as we always do. We sort of split up the different sections and each member of the working group took a part of it and commented on it. So that's what you're seeing as a collective from all the working group members on each of these topics. I think the unfortunate part of all of this is that there's just a lot of facts on the ground that we are unaware of, and it's not just us, it's community boards in general, and I think in general actually a lot of different cities and towns in New York are trying to understand and manage this as this goes along. So we might not have all the answers to what the future holds and how it's going to be done. But I will say OCM has just begun to roll out some form of training, or what they're calling training, to community boards just recently, up for that's going to be starting up in February. So we'll hopefully get some more information as to exactly how we roll. But so I think if you guys take a look at what we're suggesting, recommending, I think it's not particularly rocket science. It's very similar to what we've asked for in terms of also in just a general notice to communities about how to if they want us to comment, we need 45 days, a minimum of 45 days to comment. We have learned a lot from our experiences working with the BLP committee and the stipulation forms that the BLP committee has. So, I think the proposed change or comments to the regulations do use some of that knowledge base of trying to put that in there early. So we're getting more information about the applicant and what they're planning to do, asking them for security plans, asking them for a number of different how their operation is going to run. So yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if Frank, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just very briefly. So the proposed regulations would govern both adult use dispensaries, in other words, retail stores, as well as on-premise use of cannabis. So they're a little different than the BLP context in that community boards are going to have a role in opining on the location of retail stores as well as consumption lounges. The regulations are almost 300 pages. And as Jesse said, we divided them up in the working group and looked at them all, but then chose to focus our comments on really the areas that are chiefly of interest to us, which are the timing and the content of the notice that is going to be given to community boards, and the type of issues that we will be allowed to opine on and that the board will consider in granting licenses.
Thank you, Jesse and Frank. Paul.
Thanks. This is amazing. It's clearly a very convoluted issue, and the notion that the community board is going to be involved in both dispensaries and on-site usage is a kind of a new path for us. And so I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. One of the things that I think, Frank, Christian, you can verify this for me, is that with SLA, we don't ever get confirmation of approval of licenses and the terms and terminology of the approval. And in this document, you talk about being updated on suspensions and rejections, but could we also the terms of approval and which sites are approved? Because one of the things we're seeing around this neighborhood is there's a proliferation of illegal sites. So we don't know what ones are licensed and which ones aren't licensed.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It would be great to have approvals sent to us as well. Thanks. But great job. Amazing work.
This was Jesse Greenwald's doing. He just can't be here tonight.
Carrie?
Yeah, thanks. I have the same question as Paul, sort of in regards to how we're being notified about, those who have been operating illegally up till now. As well as, Frank, is there like a 500-foot rule? I think you were alluding to something like that, or a 200-foot rule, or?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, these are only the regulations that are governing the official process. So anything having to do with the illegal operations and how we're dealing with them, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, I think are beyond the scope of
the regulations actually go very little into enforcement of illegal activities. So they would really defer to the local municipality heavily, the sheriff's office, Department of Consumer Affairs, in any way capacity that they would have that. But this is simply about the state's provisional licenses and then distribution licenses.
And there are equivalent provisions to the 200 and 500-foot rules in the liquor license regulations. Don't hold me to the numbers, but I believe that there cannot be a license within 200 feet of a church on the same street, which is the way the liquor license rule works, and within 500 feet of a school. And then there's a separate provision that in towns and cities above 20,000 people, there can be no more than one license of a particular class within a radius of 1,000 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Joe?
Yeah, I am concerned because we're only responding. I understand these are the official regulations. However, there's a perception out there that cannabis can be sold now without going through this whole process. In our letter, we need to note this up front because that's not the case. It cannot just be sold now without having the whole process go through. And the second thing is, there's nothing about this whole enforcement thing, Jesse, I'm concerned about here. If we don't say up front that the enforcement seems to be splintered, we need to get the enforcement put in one agency as opposed to we can go here and go there, because everything that we've heard is that it's the sheriff. And tell me if I'm wrong, Frank, I saw in the regs all kinds of things about using the word dispensary, colors, about marketing to children. There's a whole pile of stuff, right? But
Yes.
if that has nothing to do with the illegal things, we're letting the state off the hook for creating a program and a vehicle, which makes sense, but then not dealing with the unintended consequences. Can we just?
I wasn't saying we shouldn't deal with this. I was just saying that these regulations do not attempt to address how they're dealing with the, onslaught of illegal dispensaries.
Right, but I'm just going to, from a point of view of the politics, I recommend that
So-
we put in our letter that this is part and parcel. It has to be dealt with, not just regulations. Otherwise, we're being narrow and just commenting on one thing.
We have already drafted, I mean, we're on record for that because that was the first letter that the working group did, if you remember correctly. And so we certainly can reference that letter, I think, in.
I just would like to include in our official comments so it becomes part of the public
I
record.
understand. That's what I'm
Here's
trying to
the
say.
big problem.
I'm trying to say that I think we're on record, so we certainly can just reiterate that in our, I don't know, I defer to Frank, but we can certainly follow up on that. And the working group has obviously been, that was the first initial concern was the legality of it.
Frank,
The
what are your
state
thoughts?
created a
I'm just trying to get, sorry, Jeffrey. Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, just generally speaking, the problem we're facing today is that the state created a mechanism for opening. They did not create a mechanism for enforcement, and as we've all witnessed.
Why do we say that? Can we just say that as part of these regs? Like there should be enforcement regs?
Yeah.
for that?
I think that we can do it sounds like it's one sentence with a footnote to our previous letter. Frank, does that sound reasonable?
I think substantively it sounds fine to me. I mean, my only question is and again, this may be just elevating procedure over substance. The Cannabis Board set out, the format they want these comments submitted and everything, which we're following. The letter is called comments to, these particular regulations, but I don't see a problem with.
Yeah, couldn't we comment that regs are missing on enforcement?
Yeah.
They're nice and narrow, but it's not reality on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, just so you all know as well, the working group, I and Jesse have been working on getting the sheriff's office to our district and paying and specifically speaking with the working group to figure out, how best we can do this, because that is the enforcement side of it is seemingly led by the sheriff's office at this point.
Thanks, Joe.
You are aware of the shooting we had in the cannabis shop on 46th and 9th, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Bert?
Hi, this is like really dense. And when I saw that the accompanying PDF had 300 and some odd pages, I took a deep breath. I said, okay, let me just go to our letter. If there's anything I should know about the 300 pages, I'll hear it in the discussion. I have one minor editorial comment. I think we use the word restrictions too much. I think we should use the word what we do in BLP, stipulations. Stipulations appears once in this letter. restrictions appear much more than stipulations, but that's minor. Two major things.
So Bert,
One-
just, you broke up a little there. You're saying,
Oh.
reduce the use of restrictions and use the term stipulations more?
I think stipulations should be used more than restrictions, but that's an editorial minor. I won't go to the wall on that. Two important things. One, there's a reference to a community impact statement. Now, we don't have this with liquor license. What is this community impact statement?
So,
Did
I don't know. It's not as I said, there are 300 pages of these and it's not.
I didn't read, so I expected you
They're
guys.
not a section I
Just
reviewed.
hold
You
on.
guys read
Just
with
on
300
process,
pages.
Bert, just so you know, what happened is the working group, they, as we do with EISs and all sorts of stuff, they broke up sections of the report.
Okay.
And not everybody, including myself, is here and able to speak to these tonight.
I
So-
got it. I understand the process, but that was something that just jumped out to me. What is a community impact statement? Because that could be a major piece of work, a community impact statement. Also, it made reference to outdoor, in one of these lounges, an outdoor component to the lounge. I don't know if we even want to approve or agree to an outdoor component. I mean, walking down this, are we talking about walking down the street and passing a cafe, a street cafe? Everybody is smoking there, and the smoke is drifting out onto the street. Are we talking about a backyard that people are smoking in the backyard, and the smoke is wafting up into people? They got to keep their windows closed. I think that's territory that I wouldn't want to approach. Reaction? Comment?
I agree.
I agree.
So
So
I,
are
Are
you
you making a
suggesting,
suggestion to add something to the letter?
I wouldn't even, I said, this question about the extent of the outdoor. I said, we don't want outdoor, period. We don't want to have a discussion about, should it be 3 feet, 12 feet to the corner? We don't want to have a discussion because we don't want it.
Are we looking at this only as the rules they put out there versus actually what community wants or responds to? I mean, this is just about like smoking. You don't want someone to smoke on top of you. You have these issues all the time with, cafes or restaurants. What makes this distinct?
What is it? 119.2 include, I didn't read the whole thing.
I mean,
but
it says the rules should provide more, explicitly provide authority to community boards to propose limitations to the use of outdoor spaces for on-site consumption lounges. So
no,
we're
but I'm asking
for the
something
authority.
different. I'm asking whether the 192 as proposed did discuss outdoor use or not.
no, there's no, 119.2 is the most rudimentary of information. I mean, it's, the applicant's name and address, the individual partners, citizenship, ownership interest, that sort of stuff. I believe there's nothing in the regulations one way or the other about, whether outdoor space can be included.
So I guess
But again, I haven't,
we should remove that whole section about the outdoor space.
Yeah, it says ask for community boards to have
Right.
authority to propose limitations. We don't want the authority to propose limitations. We don't even want to consider it.
But I think that it is important because our footnote includes a link to the New Jersey law, which shows that they're not allowed at all outside. So I guess.
Well, maybe we want to
based-
change that language.
Yeah,
to
maybe
say,
be more explicit in
Yeah.
the language.
right, which says we
If the
do
footnote
not
supports it.
want, that shouldn't be part of the authorized. approval.
Exactly.
Yes.
Sorry,
Right.
say that again, Christine?
So just change that to say that we the permits should not include any outdoor space. Period.
Marty?
I want to express a comment on enforcement that I haven't heard from this group. I am concerned that when we do get into talking about enforcement, that we don't attack the operators of the illegal dispensaries and rather enforce the landlord who shouldn't have been leasing to these operators. And the reason for saying that is that I don't want to see more criminalization of black and brown operators who are doing the wrong thing. I'd rather have the landlords attacked. I mention this because as we continue talking about this, the issue of enforcement is going to keep coming up. Thanks.
This has nothing to do with the operators are all different colors of the rainbow. Marty, it's not just black and brown. Give me a break. Have you seen folks?
And may I
know.
talk about?
They indeed are from all colors of the rainbow. I'd rather not attack them. I'd rather attack
They know
the
what they were
landlords who
doing.
rent it to them and shouldn't have.
Joe, I think
Jeffrey,
that
They're the ones who have to
Joe,
providing the
we can
service.
address comments to the chair. Everybody
Sorry.
could address their comments to the chair. Thank you.
Jeffrey, may I comment on this specifically?
Sure. Thank you, Leslie.
Okay. Marty, I know what you're talking about, only because we had on 55th Street a very specific incident of a small store shop that was opening, and people in the neighborhood asked him, and he said he's going to do CBDs, right? We contacted the landlord. The landlord had no idea because he couched it as a convenience store. So a lot of times the landlords don't even know, and the landlord actually disposed of the lease, and it's now an empty storefront again. But I'm saying, I think to say that the landlords know what's going on would be a stretch in all cases, would be a stretch. Because I think a lot of these actors are saying it's one thing and then selling them under the counter, or doing something that's another. So I would be careful by saying, let's go after the landlords, when I know in this particular case, the landlord was actually very upset when he found out this was going on. Just something to think about.
Dale?
Yeah, okay. Well, I do understand the impulse to preface this whole conversation with something along the lines of, this did not have to be this way. This was a huge screw up by the state. Other states have legalized and rolled out dispensaries with none of this fuckery. Excuse me. So it's, I really do think we need
I think it's appropriate, actually, the term.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we should put it in the letter.
Yeah, that's my urge, is to just preface this with, you guys seriously screwed this up. And by the way, we do know which dispensaries are licensed and which aren't, because there's a very recent publication, as a matter of fact, today, of the 13 dispensaries in Manhattan that are licensed. So if 13 on all of Manhattan are licensed, we've probably got, one or two of those. So most of the dispensaries, maybe one or two. Yeah. Most of the dispensaries in the district are unlicensed. And I just, was trying to find this information and did a Google search. And when you just search cannabis on Google, you get all the unlicensed dispensaries. And maybe that needs to stop also. Like, they're legitimizing themselves in spite of the fact that they're unlicensed.
Thank you, Dale. Christine?
Oh, God, there are so many comments. Practical stuff that we learn at SL with the SLA. So first, I don't know whether we are saying that, I was looking for it, but we want our stipulation to be part of the license, right? Are we saying that? And if we are not, I would suggest we do, right? And then and enforceable, that they become enforceable like the license. The other thing is that, to the point which was made before, I don't recall by whom, is that we need to have a notification of what has been approved, and there need to be a database that gives all the list of what is approved and the specification. That's something we have never been able to obtain from SLA, and which is critical, that there is a database, a spreadsheet, which says this is the name of who is approved, what page or whatever, address, etc., and the beginning of the license and the end of the license. Something fairly simple, but something which is really usable. And it could be part of the open data of New York City, because in New York City, a lot of agencies have to put the data in the open data, so we can ask for that. I mean, these are the two major concern, you know, as far as communication and with the municipality, we need those two things very strongly, I would say.
Frank, does that sound?
Yeah, no, it does. Quite honestly, I'm sort of taking these down. I was not involved in drafting this letter at all.
Right, right.
No, I'm
These
sorry.
things make sense to me, but I'll,
Right.
I'll pass them on.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Christine said, there's no, I just saw something on New York One reporting the 13 Manhattan locations. Their names are listed, but not the locations. And the cannabis office does not have this information available.
Yeah,
Jesse,
and that's something we have fought.
Hold on.
Yeah,
Jesse.
that's something we have fought with SLA for years, and we still don't have that. We still don't have a simple database, which is a list of who has a license. And it's really infuriating because it causes a lot of work. And then should we be asking, like they do on SLA, that they have a license published on their door? So which would address the issue of let's not go to people which are illegal. So in the SLA, they have to put it in a little frame and say it's, you know, the license is license number from this date to that date. And it's not very onerous, but it's at least it's public.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. That's all.
Jesse Bodine.
I was just going to clarify, we do not have any licensed, I'm trying to use the right words here, licensed dispensaries in this community district 4 area. So we received our first notification that there's someone possibly applying for one. When that application will be heard and when our 30-day comment period will begin is still up for interpretation, negotiation, and debate by the OCM, by the Office of OCM. So we're waiting on that. But just to be clarifying, anything you are seeing out in our district right now in which you can walk in and you actually can buy marijuana, cannabis, is not licensed, no matter what they tell you. Because we would get a notice, supposedly. That's how it's supposed to work.
Roberta?
I did want to echo just everything Christine said, both for the purpose of enforcement, but also for the enforcement around the equity applicants, which actually seems to be pretty important. I think the reason why this has been such a mess is New York has tried to center the equity applicants, which I think is a really admirable thing, but then consequently other non-equity applicants have tried to get around that by opening other shops as the process has been slow. I would then ask, I know that the 45-day period mirrors that of the BLP committee's process. I wouldn't be surprised if having that shorter period that the office recommends relates to being able to move these licenses along faster, because it does seem like the bureaucracy and how relatively slow the licenses are creating a problem. Is there a meaningful difference between that 30 and 45 day? And is it because of the community board's monthly meeting? Is that the reason?
Yeah, chiefly it would be mere happenstance if there was enough time for something to go to a committee and the full board in 30 days. It would be a very rare accident of timing that both the committee and the board meeting were going to happen within the same 30 days that we had to give our comments. So that is the thinking of that.
And that's a standard talking point for us for all regulatory opinion things we're able to opine on when new stuff comes down the pike.
And then
And just to clarify, it's another place the regulations are unclear. The applicant has to give us notice 30 days before they file their application. So it's really only 15 days after it's been filed, if you count all 45 days. So it's not like we are delaying the process, because it seems unlikely that under the most expedited calendar, you know, the Cannabis Board would do anything within 15 days of getting an application.
I guess the second question that I had, do we have any community input relating to outdoor use? It seems like the individuals assembled here are largely opposed to outdoor consumption sites. I would question if there are perhaps some isolated locations where there's no nearby residential sites that might in fact be appropriate for outdoor use, and if there might be community support for that. I'm uncertain. I just want to pose it in case that there is some interest there.
Well, I guess that's the split that's come up between the letter as drafted and what's been proposed. As drafted, it says, you know, we want it made explicit that people get to give their views on the use of outdoor space. But it's been proposed that, you know, we now take a substantive position on that rather than just saying it's an important issue that needs to be considered on each application. But I think that's sort of a judgment call.
Jeffrey, may I?
Yeah, Christine.
Comment? So my concern would be the difference between this and smoking, right? We have all these rules about smoking, and when you have a sidewalk cafe, you cannot smoke into it. So it seems to me that if there is a sidewalk cafe and you cannot smoke in it, then we shouldn't allow for an outdoor space to be smoked if it's cannabis, right? What I'm concerned is that then, okay, so now in the bar, people are going to say, well, if it's cannabis, I can smoke it. And now we don't know how to deal with that. This is really confusing, right? And then, or they are going to say, well, why don't you go down? That's what they do in bars. Why don't you go down further on the right? And then it's right under the window of Mr. and Mrs. X who say this is unbearable. So
Right.
I'm just,
Well, Christine, I guess
I'm just saying, let me finish. I'm just saying, I think it would get us into such a confusing area that at this point, until we understand a little better the distinction, I think it's going to really confuse things, even on
right.
the SLA side.
Well, you're getting at a global issue, Christine, which is you can't smoke cigarettes inside a bar or a restaurant, but these whole on-site consumption lounges are based upon being able to smoke inside, as I understand it. Right? I mean, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, but if it's inside, I could make the argument that if it's inside and you are going in that lounge, you are deliberately choosing this activity, right? Where if you are outside and the public is walking by, I mean, there's a lot of people around you, which was the case in the bars. People were going to drink, but they were not going to smoke. So I guess there is a distinction here. I mean, certainly for the outside, right?
Yeah, it's the hookah carve out and the cigar club as well, kind of thing.
Jeffrey, may I comment on this? I don't know if Joe wants to comment on this, but may I comment on this specific point as well?
Sure.
People are comparing this to cigarettes, and I don't think that is an apples to apples comparison. Everyone says we can smoke cigarette, we can do cigarettes, though the smoke to some is annoying and people don't like it. It's not mind altering. You know, marijuana smoke is, for some of us, it's mind altering. It's different. It might be both unhealthy. Maybe one's healthier than the other. I know there's a lot of conversation about that. But if you have a child or a dog or whatever, and you're inhaling marijuana smoke, it's a much different effect than if you're inhaling cigarette smoke. I'm not saying one is better, one is long-term detrimental. So when people say, well, we smoke cigarettes, it's very different to inhale marijuana smoke than it is for cigarette smoke. For some, for others, they don't care. You know, others don't care. They just don't There's not a preference.
Sorry, Jeffrey, if you're finished, Leslie, can I just address Roberta really quick too?
Sorry, go ahead. I'm
Sure.
done. Thank you, Carrie.
I just wanted to address from the BLP committee members' perspective on the community, showing up for outdoor spaces in general. And obviously we're dealing with liquor licenses, so this is new, but from my 2 years on BLP, we don't get more people. Like, the most people who show up to talk about a potential outdoor space and how it affects them in terms of noise and music and quality of life. So I would suspect that we would get a ton of community input on a proposed outdoor space for smoking pot.
So that is why I did want to note specifically like a distance from a residential space. There may be fairly limited space of that nature. And there's also a question of if you'd even want to go there, because, in theory, every corner of Manhattan Community Board 4 could be residential someday. You never know, right?
Yeah, like noise, I think the problem becomes that, noise travels and smoke travels. So I think that's really kind of the main issue for people who live around or near a potential outdoor space.
Yes.
Joe?
Yeah, so first I want to say, all my remarks are predicated on one thing. I totally support the dispensaries and a place to actually do consumption. Totally, I support it. However, it's a regulated thing, just like alcohol. So first, on the smoking issue, I believe we should absolutely say nothing outdoor. And second, internal, we should be specifically asking for ventilation for this, because these will end up in residential buildings. And we have to remember, or commercial building, it's going to affect people one way or the other. The building stock in our district is not all brand new. A lot of it is older and things can spread. But while we were all talking, I went through the entire document, did a search on outdoor. There's nothing whatsoever in the document about outdoor use.
Right.
So however we noted it, 1.1, whatever, is not accurate. There's nothing about outdoor use, and we should say that these regulations should govern and develop. There should be regulations developed for governing outdoor use, and any outdoor use should be very distant from any residential use. Just say that up front. I mean, it's not in the document, so they just missed it. So therefore, that's going to be the ongoing flashpoint that we're going to deal with. The second thing is, to my knowledge, and again, either Dale or Frank, correct me, for actual dispensary, these are not leased from an owner to an individual. They are leased from an owner to the state. And then the state in turn has an operator that comes in. That's the structure here. Everything I've read is about there are no leases. And the reason for that is the state is able to enforce and close down an operator who is not working well. The state holds the lease. So Frank, have you not seen that part of it? Or is that
So I think that's the part for like the nonprofit partner. The Housing Works dispensary that opened, the state secured the lease on that.
I think
do
the
not
state secures
believe
the
it's
lease
for
across the board.
every dispensary.
No?
No, so the dispense just for our own and to bring it home back to us is the dispensary notice that we got is not a nonprofit, it is a private individual who is applying to do a for going.
I'm asking about the regs more than the notice we got. So Jeffrey, why is there an not-for-profit can lease space? Why is that it put in between there, if that's the case?
That is a great question.
I mean, I just don't know. I'm just, sort of like saying, what makes that distinct?
Joe, you want to open one?
Absolutely. No, I'm very concerned about, I thought when I read the whole structure that that's what gave us the protection as a community, that the state could intervene on a poorly managed operator to pull them out of it. Because that's going to happen sometimes, right?
It's going to happen. So I have my hand raised. I just want to go back to recognizing we can put whatever we want in this letter. I just want us to recognize like this is a statewide set of regulations, and so that's why it's going to be as what do you want to call it, varied as possible, and maybe with no detail whatsoever about considering the outdoor space. So I think we can put in there and make that recommendation, but recognize that they're making this decision for the state, and so we're going to have to work with other municipal, other agencies and stuff like that about any other kind of additional enforcement.
But Joe has a point, which is there is nothing in the text which talks about outdoor, right? So it doesn't say whether it's for indoor or outdoor in a sense. And then Roberta was, what would have been your proposed language? Because I think we all jumped on it, but we don't know what is the language you would have put.
So if you look at the provision that the authors of this letter are responding to, it basically just says that municipalities have the ability to set what they believe should be the standards around consumption. I'm paraphrasing and from memory, but that's basically what it says. So it doesn't mention outdoor explicitly. I was curious just because there are so many folks here who are experienced with the siting of alcohol consumption facilities, that if you cite them further away from any residential dwelling, that like perhaps that is some sort of compromise if you would like to have some sort of outdoor site. But if that's not really practicable, or you could run into the possibility in the future that you would want to site housing near sites that are already approved for consumption, then you run into some potential issues down the line that might not be worthwhile dealing with in this particular case.
My only question is that if it's not in the text, do we need to address it now?
I think we should ask for it to be in the text, because I think Roberta's right. We're proposing all this rezoning and manufacturing sites to residential. We don't want to set up a future conflict now. Like that's,
I think it's opening a really huge can of worms, though.
I want to echo the can of worms factor in that when I think of the state,
Right.
I think of the verages of the state, and somebody in the Finger Lakes region is going to close their winery and plant marijuana and then have a beautiful sort of marijuanery.
They can't.
Right?
They can't under the regulations. They're not permitted.
Allow me to go an example of where an outdoor consumption site would make a lot of sense from the state's perspective, right, versus the municipality.
In because cities over 1 million.
So again, there's a framework by which we have to respond. And are we opening a can of worms by saying include outside or don't? And sort of just like SLA, what authority are we asking for it? Because we don't have that authority. We've kind of lost it from a sidewalk cafe perspective. So what's the teeth here? I'm just having trouble seeing it, and I'm concerned of opening something that's not.
What if we
I'm concerned that they are going to add, okay, and you can do it on the outside. And that's
we can't be silent. I would just propose something simple. In cities of over 1 million, that there be no outdoor consumption.
Okay.
Very broad, that's used.
The municipality is charged with determining outdoor consumption.
I'm pretty sure that's kind of what the guideline says. Yeah.
It says it without mentioning outdoor space. I mean,
that's the problem.
It basically delegates, time, use, and manner restrictions to the municipalities to the extent those restrictions aren't, in conflict with the original enabling legislation.
Why don't we make it just as a marker, Jeffrey, in this document?
Again, I'm just trying to get at it. It feels like we need home rule here. And so stronger being kick it down to the municipality. So how do we use that?
We could mention the differences, every municipality, it's very different, like you said, from.
But I think it's the cities. Cities of more than 1 million, it's just us.
That's us.
It was just us.
In New York State, it's used that way.
Yeah, that's how they use it to talk about New York City.
Right.
Is that the place for some sort of public input process that is set citywide, as opposed to on a community by community level?
I mean, that's if the city decides to. They may have to promulgate a rule process, and determine an agency, I guess, for that to happen.
I guess the question is, where do we get more traction? At the initial part of this law set by the state, or devolve down to municipality?
I guess I think about, sorry, having our recommendations be incorporated. And I think if we say no entirely, it's not going to be incorporated. And so is there a way we can get the word outdoor inserted that provides for teeth for us at home than just the state ignoring it from above?
I'm very nervous about, if we put the word outdoor, that's it. It's going to say outdoor. And then people are going to come back to us and say, okay, let's install some table and chairs and here we go.
Right, but we can't be blind to the fact it doesn't exist. That's not, put our heads in the sand, that does not note it. We should note that it's an issue and it's got to be addressed, period. Right?
So maybe that's a comment. That's a comment that
there should be regulations about outdoor use.
So, yeah, there should be clear regulation, especially in large cities where there is a large,
I think that's it. To direct them to create regulations around.
Right. And if there's a strong concern about outdoor use, not just because of the product, because any outdoor use creates conflict with residents. Sort of like lay out some of our discussion.
Yeah, that's
like
good.
We're coming at from nowhere.
What wasn't that the original? I mean,
No.
don't we, because now that's the original. So now, but now we're saying, right, Jeffrey, you were saying you were not.
Well, the original actually gives the power to the community, requests that the power be given to the community board to stipulate that. So I mean,
agree with Christine's first assertion about
the
once we
request
open
is
it
for
up.
community boards to propose limitations to the use of outdoor spaces for on-site consumption lounges.
Which line is that?
Page 2, lines 12, lines 11, basically 10 through 14.
And I think the other piece that we're probably forgetting is consumption is not necessarily smoking.
That's one of the things that I'm finding to be a bit of a tricky part of this, right? Is that it's have a gummy, have a.
It's not tricky. Let's just say it.
Else.
This is about smoking, right? That's what we're concerned about here. I don't care if someone's high as a kite on a gummy on the sidewalk.
I think that's fair, but so Christine, I'm confused. I want to begin to take a chunk here and let's move on. Christine, you're saying you're concerned if we say outside that then the state won't go far enough based on us mentioning outside.
Yes.
Okay. And Joe, you want it raised so that it is elevated and we are aware that outside regulations are necessary and that we have significant concerns
about any outside use for smoking. Let's clarify that part, for smoking, right? Because I think that's
except Joe, that would get so hard to enforce if the place had outdoor space and people could, eat gummies out there but couldn't smoke. I mean,
why? If it's in the rules of operation of a license and they're doing it, it's not that. It's like we do with every other SLA stuff. It gets enforced eventually, right?
Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Do we want it? Yeah.
We're pretty good at it, Christine. I've met you.
Do we want to pretend we're as smart as Frank is by acknowledging that that's going to be complicated here, or just sort of leave that to the side and sort of the regulatory authority?
I would just go with no use of alcohol.
Smoking. It's smoking use.
Me too.
I understand, Joe, but I don't have confidence in enforcement on the ground.
Yeah.
But how can we ever? It's an ongoing process in enforcement of everything we do. Right?
We'll never have enforcement, any real good enforcement. Why do you think we have all these illegal venues out there? Because there's no enforcement. There's no people,
because
there's no people to do it. There's no will to do it.
No, get ready. I'm going to back up Dale. I'm going to back
up
Dale here. This was a bullshit rollout. It has not happened in other jurisdictions across the country. Has not happened.
But we're talking New York. We're not talking about anybody else. We're talking about what goes on in this state and this city.
So
what about I have a suggestion. I have a suggestion for 1 second on line. So on line 15 or 11 to 15, we are asking for additional stipulation, which is the whole paragraph we wanted to do about, the stipulation have to be included, etc. So if we have the right to do additional stipulation, that covers outdoor, and I think this is where we do it.
Insert something there.
I mean, Christine, this gets to your whole point of you want to make sure that the license will be inclusive of our stipulations.
Exactly. And
Right,
so
but-
if this is the case, then we have our own policy about outdoor use and smoking, et cetera, and then it gets incorporated into the stipulation, which is the
Our
way we
comments
do
are
it.
political. We need to elevate the issue of outdoor use, so at least the state's aware of it. They may choose not to act on it. We need to note that outdoor smoking is going to be an issue.
And Joe, I am afraid that the solution is going to, the resolution is going to come against us. It's going
And
to
then we
be
deal with that politically when it happens. But to say it doesn't exist is negating the whole conversation we had tonight.
Well,
We have to say
no,
it
I'm not
exists.
saying
I
it
don't think
doesn't
we're
exist.
negating.
I'm saying this is one of the stipulation we are going to work on.
But if we're not saying it, we're not making a political statement about it.
So
This
we
is
can
not just
say-
rulemaking, it's political.
We can
statement.
say in that paragraph, this is the, we will have the stipulation, including stipulation about smoking.
I think
You know.
that it could, the paragraph, starting on page 2 on line 10, the bullet that starts with, although 119.2 allows for additional resources, restrictions on certain activities, MCB4 has grave concerns about the use of potential outside consumption.
Yes,
Accordingly, MCB4 recommends more explicitly direct authority for community boards and municipalities to propose limitations of outdoor use for on-site consumption lounges. So this
Yes.
opens the document, opens
Yes.
the statement with grave concern. It makes a recommendation of what to do,
Right.
and then we provide a little bit of the
and
fluff.
then we want them incorporated into the license.
Well, we're going to say that generally, that we want all stipulations
Yeah.
Yes,
incorporated into the license.
I think that sounds good, Jeffrey.
Frank, does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, Jeffrey, Christine, and Dale and Joe on the same page. We achieved the great about things.
And maybe Roberta.
let's talk about
Roberta,
casinos.
Is that good for you, Roberta?
So
Okay.
I think, is everybody, Roberta, does that sound appropriate to you?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I see no more hands.
Well, by the way, I will call Dale Jeffrey tonight because my 10-year-old just asked me what fuckery means, Dale. So I'm calling you and you can talk to her.
Leslie, he'll provide a G-rated definition.
It's a good word.
I just wanted his problem and not mine.
That is very
Sorry.
funny. That is
Um,
so funny.
Thank you for that moment, Leslie and Dale. Okay, if there's no further questions, Frank, do you feel comfortable with, I feel like I have a strong understanding of sort of what was a little bit contentious for us to get through there, but now I think I understand it quite well. I'm happy to share some language on that. Do you feel you've collected the other sort of secondary comments?
yeah, well, I have all the comments. We also have the video.
Yep, exactly. Okay. If there's no final questions, I'll take a motion to adopt the letter as amended.
So moved.
Motion.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Dale? Any objections? Present, oh, Marty, is that an objection? Thank you. One objection. Present, not eligible? Abstentions? The letter passes with 13 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you, everybody, for that discussion. Moving on to the next item of our agenda, which is updates from me. The Port Authority Bus Terminal Replacement Working Group is officially reconvening on February 8th. We're doing our internal planning and scheming accordingly. The port will be receiving sort of a tweaked letter still from us regarding that, just to be on the record. We're also planning discussions separately with our team of elected officials, of which I want to acknowledge that many are new, but many are not. And so we want to make sure we have got everybody in the place where we want them to be as effective as possible on the matter. Penn Station is kind of even a more of a up in the air moment. There are, and I say that, and I've said this publicly already, we have a task force for the public realm planning of the area on Thursday, but I still don't know what the point of that is, given there's new opposition to the GPP as it relates to the proposal that would prevent it from moving forward in any way, shape, or form. And so we're in a very weird spot with Penn right now, which was another reason we wanted to successfully be sure that Bayview was separate and apart from it. You heard about the Cannabis Working Group this evening. Props to that group. I'm sure the work will continue as necessary, and maybe eventually we'll get some clarity on the topic from the folks at the Office of Cannabis Management. I do want to acknowledge that the Borough President's Office has been organizing a lot of the community boards on this. CB2 is the only community board that's had official hearings on the licensure of establishments based on the one on 10th Street and Broadway and one down on Bleecker Street. So sort of to be continued as those make their way down the process. On the NYU Capstone Project, you'll recall the team with the work we're doing with the folks at NYU. Right now, we are in the stage of collecting survey responses to questions to members of the community in the sort of area as defined by location, trade, association, etc. And there's also a number of virtual workshops that the Capstone team is overseeing with folks that the working group invited to participate on. So work continues on that apace. Jessica, anything on that to add? I feel like my report there was just disjointed because there was a whole bunch of stuff on it.
No, I would just say if you've received an invite in your inbox or heard anybody talking about it, our participation in these focus groups and in the survey response has been relatively light. So we're doubling back on that now, excuse me, to try to get some more responses. So, you know, you can feel free, we'll share it out with the group. But if you have something in your inbox and want to forward it to some of the key stakeholders that were previously identified and add your voice to it, please do.
Thank you. Other small meetings and events for the month. Clue and Housing met with Related in Councilmember Botcher's office regarding the rebuilding of 500 West 28th Street for affordable housing. You'll recall this was an illegal demo that we've been advocating to get rebuilt, and they are required to rebuild it. So moving that forward. Back to Penn Station, we had a working group with Congressman Nadler's office to talk about Penn, but also the Hudson River Tunnel project. And I am I'm going to share the good news that we got from that call because it was really good news. For the Gateway Tunnel to proceed, they need an area to put construction, staging, debris, etc. That was going to be directly on top of where our new EMS station, is sited to go on 29th Street. Everybody realized 29th Street between 11th and 9A is a one block sort of dead end to the West Side Highway. And so let's just give construction staging to Gateway really in the middle of the street and allow construction to go forward for Gateway and simultaneously get construction underway for the EMS site as well. You know, this is a decade-long project. This is a very low use block. It would not affect, it would actually provide for better access for ambulances once they're there. And so very happy to have this update since this was literally a significant wall in the way of moving the EMS station forward. Transportation participated in a MTA West 28th Street substation construction advisory committee. Obviously, this has been constituted because of the construction that's going to begin on West 28th Street for the substation. So I'm sure we'll be staying a part of that. I would assume we're a formal member of that advisory committee as it relates to the construction there. Jesse, is there anything else that I missed? I feel like there was. No, just some others upcoming that I'll report on. Joe, Jessica, and I are meeting with the borough president at the end of the week to talk through some the granular aspects of our affordable housing plan, as we've been doing as we continue to take this on a road show. given the governor's state of the state, as well as the mayor's indication to really move ahead on some significant housing stuff, we want to make sure that the low-hanging fruit in our plan is very visible and on the table for all of our stakeholders across the board, and to make sure that like they're actually reading and acknowledging the detail that is in the plan as well. So more to come on that. Paul.
A quick question on the housing plan tour. Is Brad Lander a part of that tour? I saw him speaking on like NY1 Inside Politics, something about housing issues.
That's interesting. We don't have a tour. You mean the meetings tour? You know what? Why don't we reach out? That's not a bad idea at all. The controller should certainly be aware of how the city is going to use its financial levers to move affordable housing forward. So we will put that on the outreach list. Thank you.
All right, awesome, thanks.
Joe?
Yes, Jeffrey, I will be attending that meeting about the Manhattan-wide borough plan on Thursday. I confirmed that. We'll list that today.
Great.
So that'll be about the borough president's releasing a Manhattan-wide affordable housing plan based upon our model.
Yep. And then I also am meeting with the CB8 chair who wants to figure out how his board can come up with a plan, and CB3 has also reached out about how they can create an affordable housing plan as well. I think that's it. More to come in my new business portion of the meeting. So Mr. Bodine, our esteemed district manager, over to you.
Hi, everybody. As Jeffrey already mentioned, the city's EO is extended for another month. So unless we feel differently here at exec, we will continue to meet virtually, 100% virtually going forward into February. You guys have your full board agenda and your committee schedule for February in the Dropbox. Please take a look at it. So, and not just your committee, but your fellow board members' committees, and so you guys can make sure you're all on the same pages on top in terms of proposed agenda topics. Full board agenda. Right now, I have two hearings. So something that's come up that I think Jeffrey's going to mention at new business. But the mayor, in my entire time here, the city has never released the preliminary budget this early, even though they're supposed to. So we are always usually dealing with the response to the preliminary budget next month, or actually sometimes even the following. But they did it this year, so that was a surprise. So I was speaking with Leslie, I spoke with Jeffrey. We're going to try to pull it off where we can get a response to the preliminary budget for this upcoming full board. So we will be within the 30-day comment period and not outside of it. So for that reason, we are putting a hearing on for the preliminary budget for this upcoming full board. We hope to have a letter by Friday, Monday, the latest. And we'll be reaching out to the members of the budget task force to see if we can quickly organize something between now and Friday. Many of you are on this same committee, and so I hope you'll please put up with us trying to request this meeting. But besides that, the other hearing I have right now was going to be the cannabis comments on the cannabis, or at least our comments on our comments on the cannabis regulations. And so but those are the two hearings that we have. Just wanted to make sure I highlight that for everybody. I'm sorry, let me go back. Okay, changes upcoming committee schedule for February. Everything meets as regular except for Clue, because of the holiday. We are moving that to the Tuesday, the next Tuesday. So that would be the 21st instead of the 20th. But everybody else meets on that it's regular.
I also see a change for exec.
I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. Since we're at exec committee, I missed that. Yeah, so because of that as well, is the executive committee is moving to having to move to Wednesday the 22nd. As of right.
Jesse, just to clarify, that is because we can't have the meeting on the 27th because 2 days later would be our full board. I guess I'm just wondering why it isn't the following Monday. I'm sorry for not catching this sooner.
Yeah, I mean, basically because the point of exec is to have it, it's usually the Monday before the full the week before the full board. And so obviously if we just we can make that decision as we get closer to the end of February, but that's the reason. I mean, we certainly can hold it on the 27th if we want to. There's nothing unless there's a piece of something to be voted on that needs to get out before the 1st.
Thank you for clarifying. So update calendars, please. Clue is Tuesday, February 21st. Exec is Wednesday, February 22nd.
Yeah, no, my apologize about skipping exec there.
Yeah, hold on. Jeffrey, I thought you were asking why it's on a Wednesday and not Monday, the 20th. Do we have another meeting that night?
Is that I think we had to meet after Clue, or Jesse should
The
it be
20th is
20th is-
President's
Yeah, the
Day.
20th.
Okay.
20th is
Holiday.
is President's Day, so the officially a holiday. So that's
Got
why
it.
we
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
why we wouldn't. Yeah. Sorry.
Roberta?
Just one quick question, just to clarify the process for response to the mayor's budget. Will there be a hearing added to the full board agenda?
Yes. So what we typically do is we have the budget task force meet, respond, create a document as a response letter to the preliminary budget, and that is added to the full board agenda, and it usually goes before exec. But because this was dropped in the middle of the month and the budget task force did not have the time, and there was actually no date that would really have worked to hold a meeting to respond, we will be doing it after exec. But hopefully what we're trying to do is have it in time for the full board. So we would be meeting our charter requirements of holding a hearing and providing a response to the preliminary budget within the 30 days.
Okay, so that means there's likely going to be a budget task force meeting between now and February 1st, and also a hearing at the full board. That's what you're saying.
Yes, we're going to attempt to see if we can get a quorum of the budget task force. I mean, this letter is sort of, we've cultivated this letter into a pretty kind of drop-in letter where we put in the things that we've gotten from the preliminary budget, the things that are outstanding. Not all of them, obviously, because it's not regurgitation of the statement of district needs, but some sort of really streamlined things based off of also looking at what the mayor is saying is a priority for him. So many times you run into where the mayor is saying, we're going to put a lot of money into this because it's a priority. And then we look at those requests for our budget and they're not being fulfilled for whatever reason. So yes, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then finally, just I think I have my last thing is office space. So we are moving ahead. Being told we're in a very good position to be approved by OMB by the end of this month, which is the big hurdle. And so once that happens, we can start going through the rest of the process. That is for the Film Center building on 9th Avenue between 45th and 46th, I believe, right? Or it might be 44th and 45th. So I'm really happy about the space. Again, it's going to be a very large conference room that hopefully can actually really hold committee meetings in and things like that. So, that does mean, though, because of the delay, we had some delay for a number of different reasons, but we will be needing to extend our time in the current space. So we will be negotiating with Brookfield to extend our licensing agreement there. Most likely to the end of 2023. But that is my update.
Thanks, Jesse. Joe?
On a prior item, Jeffrey, believe it or not, the state alone will lease cannabis dispensaries and then choose an operator. The state does the lease. I just did a research on it. I'm amazed.
I don't understand that because there's a lot of discussion around folks having to have a lease in place before they're issued a license.
The state signs the actual lease. So that'll help us, I guess, in the enforcement going forward.
But does that distinguish them between a dispensary and what do they call it, a cannabis lounge?
I don't know.
So, because you're talking about a dispensary, like a liquor store,
I don't know.
there may be a distinguish between one.
Well,
and
I
the
think we'll leave it. We'll certainly share that and get a reaction from the working group and see what else we can dig up on that for sure.
Yeah.
Jesse, anything else?
Not to my knowledge, unless somebody has anything for me.
I wanted to add something before new business of our elected officials, spearheaded by our borough president, sent a letter to basically, I think, City Hall, requesting a parallel task force to what was developed on 125th Street by the Business Improvement District up there to attempt to improve quality of life conditions. It's been deemed a successful multi-agency outreach operation on 125th Street. And given the success there, that idea was discussed down sort of in the 30s, 40s Penn Station Garvin District area to be replicated in Midtown. And so all of our elected officials sent a letter making that request. There was a story about it in our town news that came out today. And so hopefully it's something we've been asking for a long time. It's everything about concentration of services to, direct reaction to situations on the street, all that kind of stuff. So it's useful that the 125th Street folks thought what they've done up there is effective. And so hopefully we can see that replicated in our neighborhood as well. So let's see, Dale, I'm going to go sort of in reverse. We'll go, are basically the issues of are you looking for sort of an admin letter to refresh our request and ask for, I'm just curious of the request.
Yeah, that letter went out. It went out to all electeds who are no longer in office. Everyone is gone. Everyone's been, sorry for the noise here. There seems to be some speed racing going on 10th Avenue. Yeah, so I wanted to have it resent and say, today we've not had a response. We haven't had any accountability on this, and address it to the current office holders instead of the ones that were in place 2.5 years ago. And also to the NYPD, whoever.
I thought it went to the NYPD and it was a CC to our electeds.
Yeah, it was, okay. but including, I think the CO has
the
switched
commanding officer.
Yeah, but we never got a response.
I hear you. I would say, unfortunately, we don't get a response. I'm not saying this about this particular letter. Every one of our letters merits a response. I think this sounds like an appropriate admin letter to resurface. We would attach our previous letter and just based on numerous facts, request acknowledgement and a response.
Yeah.
Okay. Leslie, over to you, please, for the update on the coastal resiliency meetings you've been attending.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And this is really just to get everyone up to speed and on some stuff coming down the pike as well. Some of you may know the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers recently, well, maybe not so recently now, released what's called the HAT study, which is really the New York and New Jersey harbor focus area feasibility study. This is to combat rising tide waters and to implement a coastal resiliency plan. So this is not just a citywide plan, but a multi-state plan, considering pretty much all the waterways of New York City towards Long Island and parts of New Jersey. So just so everyone knows, there were a number of plans when they released this were included, including a quote unquote preferred plan, or what they're calling the tentatively selected plan. And the reason why we're talking about it is because this preferred plan includes erecting about 10 to 25 foot wall between the West Side Highway 9A and Hudson River Park up to around 34th Street in the 30s there somewhere. So this is just the initial plan, the one they're promoting. So WPE hosted a presentation by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I've gone to a number of forums and informational sessions about this. So this is really a multi-billion hefty plan or plans. It's going to be months, probably years, this process. But just so you know how WPE is approaching it right now, We're reviewing a draft response at our February meeting. The deadline for initial response is in March for this. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they actually have been extremely accessible. They are vigorously encouraging public comment, asking us not to hold back. So we are not. WPE is going to really concentrate right now on this wall that's in their proposed plan. All this is subject to change, but I think that we make our statements now on what we think is important. And listen, there are many, many elements. I mean, this is a huge, huge plan. There are many elements. When I go to these meetings, about this much is in our district, to be honest with you. But this wall is a prominent element that would affect us. So anyway, just so everyone will know, that's kind of where WP is at with this. And I'm sure it's going to, as we go further, draw in other committees, maybe, as we move forward. And also just something to note, we have been in contact with CB2 about this. They have the same initial concerns we do. They are drafting their letter. We're drafting our letter. It's going to be somewhat similar. And then we're talking about a possible joint letter in the next few months on this, but you guys will obviously know.
And if you're interested, it's on the WPE agenda for February as well. Joe.
Just one piece of information, Leslie. Where would the wall sit in the river? You haven't made that clear yet.
It's not in the river. It is in between the highway and the park.
Oh, got it. It's
a beauty. It looks wonderful. So as you can imagine, people were apocalyptic, but I think, so listen, we talked to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They're actually quite responsive. You know, there was no community input. A lot of it was feasibility. A lot, they chose this for many reasons. And then I actually asked, can we mix and match plans? If there's something down at the Verrazano Bridge, can we get rid of the wall, not, switch out one whole plan for another whole plan? And they said, yes, this is a very long process. But as you can imagine, when a photoshopped picture of a graffiti wall going up between the West Side Highway and Hudson River Park goes out into the internet, people get crazy, and understandably so. So, but we're just taking this step by step, and just so everyone knows, we are addressing it.
Paul.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, the notion of a 25-foot wall between the West Side Highway and Hudson River Park is an abomination, and I'm glad to hear that there's discussion opposing that. But one of the things, when we were dealing with zoning flood resiliency in the zoning context, we talked a lot about not just stopping the water from coming in, but what to do once the water was in, and then how to better evacuate the water. So there were three components. And I'd be interested to hear more about how the Army Corps of Engineers is looking at how to make water evacuate the area once it comes in. Because if you put up a wall, it stops it. But if it comes beyond the wall, now it's in and it's stuck in. So
that was actually brought up on one of the informational sessions. The plan is, I think, like 700 pages. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages. I shouldn't say the plan. They actually put forward a number of plans. When I say the plan, there is a preferred plan that they are suggesting, which includes the wall. Other plans do not include that wall. There's, there are elements that prevent the water from coming up further downstream. But Paul, yes, that was addressed. But I think how WPE, and we talked about this with Jeffrey, I believe, a little bit, how WPE is kind of approaching this now is there are a lot of elements we can deal with, right? And we can ask questions, but I think we are just going to, quote unquote, attack the wall, tear down the wall type of thing. And that's going to be our focus before we move on to, plan B, or I guess, round two.
Thank you.
And like Jeffrey said, we're drafting a letter because we thought it was important. We're drafting a letter, and the drafted letter is going to be discussed at the WPE meeting, which of course will then go to full board.
Bert?
Yes, so the way I understand it, and like you said, there's like multiple plans and variations on themes. But with this wall, they're saying, we want to stop the wall, we want to stop the flood at this wall. So what was the reasons for not protecting the park and having a wall or something similar on the other side of the park? Did they give any reasons for that?
I think it's feasibility. I think when we said, why don't we put the wall in the water? I mean, Bert, if you see the plan, there are I should say, I keep saying plans. There are levees, and they're all over the Hudson, going all the way down to Staten Island, going all the way over to New Jersey. So this is multifaceted, many elements. Obviously, we're concentrating on this wall because it affects our district, and it's obviously, right there in front of us. So that was asked, and their answer always is, I guess we could do that type of thing. It's just it's up to your federal elected officials mostly, and money. And we can mix and match. As you can imagine, when I go to these informational sessions, 99% of it are like people from the outer boroughs, because a lot of it really relates to them. So our piece in relation is very minuscule to them, but obviously not to us. So we're kind of focusing on the wall and what we can do with other elements as a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, I know. Part of the background of my question is, the way I understand it, on the Lower East Side, the park there is being protected. Some people are objecting to how it's being protected, but the park is being protected. No wall was proposed between at the highway line, but a wall or something similar, flood protection on the other side of the park. For some reason, they thought it was permissible, available, easy, feasible to do it there, but not in Chelsea or Uptown here.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's part of a but you're right. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
we've asked, can it be like a retracted, can the wall go down? Something like if the flood is coming, do you press a button and it comes up? I mean, or do we put something over the West Side Highway that is a natural hilly? I mean, there were a lot of,
Okay.
but I think instead of going down that road right now, I think our initial letter, there's going to be many letters, I think, coming out from this board on this.
This is just the beginning.
I think this is just the beginning, and it's like, no wall. We want to see other options, and there are other options. Let's look at that and see what they come back with.
Thank you.
Harry?
Yes.
Thanks, Leslie. Can you just restate the streets again that you said this maybe wall would?
Yes, it
where
goes.
would be.
Absolutely. I think it goes right now. It said like around 34th Street, but now they're saying it might be a little higher, but I think it's in the mid 30s there, but it goes all the way down south. So it really covers more of CB2 area than it does us.
To the battery. To the battery.
Yeah. All the way down. Sorry, down there around Manhattan as well. But it stops really for us. Goes through Chelsea, and then it stops really in the 30s. It doesn't go further than that because of just coastal waters and maritime, this and that I'm probably not well versed in, but that's what they're proposing. As their preferred plan.
Thanks,
And
Leslie.
Carrie, I can send Jesse. There is a link to the plan and plans, all of them, because when they released it, they released all the plans at once. And actually, it's very good when they discuss it. They talk about all the plans, and then they say why this is their, or not why really, but this is their preferred plan and some of the reasons why. So I can send the link to Jesse, or Jesse probably has the link and can send
I can do it.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks. I just, can I ask it? I have I don't know anything about this, but did they discuss locks at all?
Oh, yes. That has been talked about for decades. Uh-oh.
Okay.
Oh, Jesus. Really?
That's the Photoshop. That's the Photoshopped.
Wait, hold on. I want to
that
take a
was-
screen grab.
Yeah, I
Oh
can
my
email you.
God.
Hey,
That
Leslie,
was going around.
could you
Yes.
just note on their website, a lot of the links to the various proposals don't work for some reason.
Oh, really? I have it in a PDF too. I'll double check.
You get a 404 message.
They've erased any trace except for the wall. No. Yeah, I don't know.
Watching this meeting. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll send it around.
Thank you. Thank you.
As long as there's a two-way bike lane on top of the wall, I'm fine with it.
Dale, I would
Folks,
expect nothing
folks,
else.
Jokes.
Yeah, let's be clear.
Actually,
there's
that
a lot
was
of
what was
jokes.
proposed. It's
No.
there.
Dale, that's under the headline of fuckery, just so you know.
Your 10-year-old already knows that word. She's a New
Yeah,
Yorker.
I
So we're moving on, eh, Jeffrey?
Thank
let's
you.
move on.
Yes,
Thank
we're
you.
done.
So,
We're done.
I would like to bring to exec's attention, this has been batted around for years now, and I want to formalize it, the establishment and creation of a bylaws working group. Our bylaws haven't been formally looked at or adjusted in, gosh, I want to say probably high level, 10 to 15 years. And, you know, once this is constituted, the initial direction will obviously be a look at them, but things that come to mind, for me, consider a couple of things, but will not be limited to elections and terms of officers, removals, and also our hybrid meeting policies and how that, if anything, gets incorporated into the bylaws. So in some talks right now with Jesse to figure out sort of process, people, all those good things, but stay tuned to hear from me for updates on that. And then second, saving the meaty discussion to the end. As everybody is aware, the state of New York is issuing 3 downstate gambling licenses. It is appropriate to assume that 2 of the 3 licenses for downstate will be issued to existing gaming facilities, one at the Aqueduct racing track in Queens and another at the Raceway in Yonkers. That leaves 1 license up for grab. Earlier this month on January 6th, the state issued its RFP to folks interested in bidding on the license and their application accordingly. It's $1 million to submit an application, and the license alone costs $500 million just to begin. There's been a lot of discussion about this. Every publication has written about it. There are 4 Manhattan proposals on the table right now. I'll start from the east side and take it to the west side. There's a vacant swath of land south of the UN in East Midtown that has a proposal out there. Saks Fifth Avenue has a proposal. SL Green and Caesars Casino has a proposal in Times Square, and Related and Wynn casinos have a proposal or an idea for something on the Western rail yards.
I think they're all ideas so far, really, not proposals yet, right?
They're putting their proposals together. We haven't seen an official proposal from anybody. So something that I think that's already happened. So then next step, there is a 6-member task, very empowered task force that was created by the gaming legislation, made up of the governor, the mayor, the borough president, the city council member, the state assembly member, and the state senator that will vote on any gaming license in their district. CB5 has taken a position to reject any and all outright casino licensing in its boundaries. Based on the fact that we are aware of the Western rail yards being looked at, I am looking for sort of support for the idea that right now we simply restate what we have an expectation for to take place on the Western rail yards. What happened on the Western rail yards was many years ago, but there's a whole bunch of commitments that have been made that were a part of that process. And it's very important, I think, that those be resurfaced as everybody's putting their ideas together. As a step 1, this is our expectation. I had discussions with this with Paul and JD and Christine as well. We had a small meeting, and I'm curious to kick it over to Paul, JD, Christine, for your additional thoughts on how we were thinking about this, and then obviously open it up for discussion.
Jeffrey, Paul, I'll go first. Jeffrey, also part of the idea was to open it up to discussion from the larger community.
Correct. So framing the tonight is this is brought up in new business to have a preliminary discussion, to then potentially raise it as a public discussion at a future executive committee meeting.
Right, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. And Joe, I mean, I think this sort of addresses your issues that there are no formal applications right now. And so how do we as a board kind of preemptively strike and say what our expectations are? And there's current zoning in place at Hudson Yards. Those expectations should be fulfilled. We have fought with them on the Hudson Yards agreement multiple times now and the various aspects of that. And our expectation is they should deliver on what was promised. So we kind of set our turf. But also had to add a little bit of color, when CB5 has come out already in opposition to anything, even before anything is brought forward. And, our board has typically been much more willing to have discussions on things. And as a result, we get better results. And I use Empire Station, Penn Station complex as a perfect example of that. So I like the idea of, just reiterating where things stand at Hudson Yards and what our expectations as a board are, opening up the conversation to the community and having them provide some guidance and direction. And then when an application comes in, I think we're better positioned to talk to them about what options exist.
Leslie?
Jeffrey, you said that CB5 said they're rejecting any proposed. Who did they write a letter? Who did they
They
express?
wrote a resolution 2 or 3 months ago.
To the state, I guess, or or everyone. They probably
I
just
think
CC'd
so.
everyone.
I'm sure to the folks that are responsible for appointing people to the task force.
Gotcha.
Joe?
Yeah, we don't have zoning in place. We have an entirely approved plan for the Western Rail Yards that has building locations, sites. The zoning is so the zoning text is so ultra specific in that location, and it has a large open space, and it has a school, you name it. I am very concerned if there's any the thought in this discussion that we should leave the door open toward a casino at this location.
So I'm not sure where you're getting that from, since the point of the base.
No. I'm not. I'm putting this up publicly. I'm not getting it at all, because I think it's one thing for Board 5 to do a very sort of knee-jerk reaction, this use period, no, without a plan in place, right? But here we actually have something distinct. It's not Saks Fifth Avenue or 1515 Broadway. We have a fully baked, well laid out plan that was negotiated in granular detail with the City Planning Commission and the mayor's office, right?
Including affordable housing, right, Joe?
Which has affordable housing, it has the largest open space, and it has a school and all other kind of stuff. I just think we should gauge it in that way to say, this location has already been through a major and very participatory public process. And here's what we came up with. This is inappropriate to even consider this location for a casino. Because I believe the money stakes at hand, should this become the one, will be an entirely wholesale revision of the Western Rail Yards. And what's happened here is that Related has not been able to get the financing to build the platform. So they're looking any way possibility for the platform. And, remember they entered into those discussions with Madison Square Garden about relocating to, they're trying to figure out anything to make it work. I'm just very nervous that the amount of money firepower behind this, if we don't upfront say, this deal is done, go someplace else, we're going to get a problem going forward. Because our electeds need to hear the signal from us as a community, don't need to think about it. So, because they're going to get dangled a lot in front of them in terms of community benefits, trust me, like a lot. So I'm just, Jeffrey, this is my I'm sorry if I'm being not so clear, but that's like, we cannot even entertain it because of the prior things that we went through the whole public process with, in which thousands of people participated.
Paul?
Yeah, and Joe, I think your point is well taken. But the fact of the matter is that we've had these agreements and they've reneged a number of times. And I think you're right. Related is looking for a funding source. And so I think the point is we need to be ahead.
It's not an agreement, Paul. It's actual zoning with sites specific and things required. That's not the Hudson Yards or Western Rail Yards agreement. It's a separate document. I'm talking about the legal facts on the ground of what can and can't go there. That's baked in.
Yeah. All right, but if they come and seek a zoning change to get that accomplished, even, you know, like, I just think we need to be ahead of the curve on this, that's all. I think we're in violent agreement here, Joe.
Okay.
Jessica?
Sorry. I would just add to Joe's, I mean, again, in agreement with it sounds like Joe and Paul here, but I would specifically say that to put this back on the table, you know, undermines entirely their credibility. And to what degree do we think they actually would deliver on any promises that they may make? And so Joe's comment that they are proposing to deliver or dangle more, you know, investment in the community, they haven't delivered sufficiently on the last investment, which, you know, I think we need to call specific attention to, that there's still commitments, and until those have been met, there are no, you know, further conversations to be had.
Bert?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we reiterate what we have, not only the agreements, but like as Joe said, there's zoning. We fought and we changed the zoning to reflect the agreements. And that zoning is important. And I think above it all, the developers have been getting all the press about, oh, casinos coming to Hudson Yards, blah, blah, blah. There is nothing in any of those stories talking about what's supposed to be there according to the zoning, according to the agreements. So we have to not only reiterate, we have to make sure, and I'm not the person to answer the question, we have to make sure how we communicate that and make it loud and clear and get press about it and get people to know that, wait a minute, we're hearing about this casino, but you know, there's agreements and there's zoning in place for something else there. You know, and maybe refresh my memory, everyone, about boundaries. Is Times Square part of Community Board 5?
No.
But I see it. No. Okay. So they're not talking about Times Square.
No, wait, I'm sorry. Times Square is part of Community Board 5.
Yes, it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Board 4. Yes,
Yeah,
Times
yeah,
Square's
No,
about
I know Board 4 is not.
Yeah. Yes.
So they're saying no Times Square. And they're just, well, no comment.
and Saks Fifth, anything. Saks Fifth Avenue is also in their boundary.
And they gave no reason why they think it's inappropriate, did they?
So I am
That's across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral. I can understand there might be an issue there, right?
And since when
No,
has
no,
the
Times
juxtaposition of
Square
one
is not across
facility
from
affected the
St.
siting of
Patrick's.
another? But let's also, I want to
Okay.
encourage, I really want to encourage, Roberta, if you'll indulge me for a moment, folks to stay macro for this conversation tonight. I understand the desire, as I have learned from many of my senior board colleagues on this very call, to get granular out the gate. The process is still very macro. As was pointed out during this discussion, we haven't seen proposals, we just have ideas, and we don't even know what the color of those ideas is going to be. And so the point of surfacing this tonight is to begin to think through what our idea, beyond just a no, would be. And the reason I sort of framed it as a let's resurface exactly what our expectation is for the Western rail yards is exactly what has been framed out here in terms of the zoning, the open space, the commitments, not just the commitments, but the zoning text, which, as Joe said, is very specific. So that's the whole sort of outlay of where I was coming from for this evening, because we're potentially going to be forced into discussion on this, and this gives us a platform to stand on that is higher, I think, by bringing our sort of old position to the front, than struggling to make that position public when it's going to be clouded by something that is grandiose and sprinkled with community givebacks and all the other things. Roberta?
So in that vein, I imagine, both because I may have heard this secondhand from someone who had been pitched by the developer, but also because I imagine this argument will be made that in order to make good on promises made to the community, a decade or more ago, that it would be helpful to have additional revenue to ultimately finance this work. And I'm not being prescriptive about what a letter ought to contain, but I do think that that is likely something that the board should respond to. Specifically, if the argument is if you put a casino here, it will be better because we'll be able to actually finish all this affordable housing and build the school. I think that you likely have to anticipate that in the letter. I don't know entirely what the answer is. I think that there's like an impulse to call yes on that, but I'm not really sure where the board and the rest of the community sits on that.
Dale?
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, I tend to agree with the top line argument that Joe is making that, the zoning precludes any such use. I just also want to, throw in there that there's all this discussion of related tax breaks to build on that site and all the spend that the city did to facilitate a park and a train station and so on. It was in the billions. So the idea that it's kind of a double dip at this point if they're gonna, build out however you want to characterize what they've built, and then, and then dip in for the casino revenue. But I think stick to the top line, which is there's no sanctioned place for a casino in the district.
Joe, if you'd be okay, I'd like to go to Christine since she hasn't spoken yet. Thank you. Christine?
Yeah, the thing I'm concerned about is that we send the wrong message. I think if the way we are, and I agree with Joe, the position should be, we already have this totally baked plan, and it's just a matter of executing this plan. What we don't want is this guy's coming back and say, oh, well, in order to give you what you wanted, we need to have more, which is exactly what they are going to do. They are going to say, oh, now I need a casino and I need something else in order to give you what you were supposed to do. And we have all seen what happened on Related on the, the open space in the middle of Hudson Park, which is not an open space. It's totally commercialized, and so they have already stolen from us a lot of things that they were supposed to give us. So I'm totally in agreement with Joe, and I think the way we need to couch this message is not, it's kind of don't even think about it in a sense, because we don't want the discussion to be, oh, there was a little bit of an opening there, and of all the people, everybody has said no, and these guys are not saying no, so maybe we have something. So I'm very nervous about that. I'm very nervous about how it's going to be read, and I think that, personally, I think they were supposed to give us a plan, and we want that plan. And we negotiated to death at that time. There were a lot of trade-offs, and we don't want to put in anything else as a trade-off here, and certainly not a casino. And we can't trust them because we know they're going to say, oh, you'll have the green space, and then the casino is going to be instead of the green space. So we kind of know what's going to happen.
Because inside, you never know what time it is, so it's green.
Right.
But I think
that's my worry is let's not send in any way, in any format, the wrong message.
Put the casino.
That's fair. So Joe, going to you, but we're having the discussion that was meant to be had tonight to allow sort of me as chair of the executive committee to draft something that we can then formally take up at a future exec meeting. I left that out of my process pitch in the beginning, that this starts the discussion. Joe.
So the basic cautionary tale is that Related negotiated a portion in the Eastern Rail Yards to have a piece of public sculpture in the middle. Who would ever think that would turn into the vessel? Because The spot on the bottom is the public sculpture, but who thought it would go like this, taking over the whole thing?
Suicide tower.
I am so concerned that related of who they are with the money in a PR machine from Wynn Casino would push all kinds of buttons from the construction industry up, down, and sidewise to union jobs. They'll do all the same playbook they did initially with Hudson Yards. So we need to, in our call out, Jeffrey, when we go forward with this, it's not just any commitments. The zoning is so prescriptive here that the chair of the city planning commission negotiated where the High Line passes through a building on the corner of 30th and 11th, 30th and 12th kind of thing. It is a plan. It is not just zoning. It's a full plan for this site that includes element, and a casino is not compatible with that plan, period. And just say it very, very clear, because they will use the tiniest little opening. They will drive their PR bulldozer through to try to get other people to say, we're the ones who don't want any progress. That's what I feel is going to happen here. So,
And so allow me to play out a scenario for the committee, because I want to emphasize something. The point is to have a discussion with us this evening and whoever's tuning in, and that there'll be something drafted for the committee to consider. We'll put this on an agenda, right? Folks will come up. Hopefully there's some hands raised. We have public participation, and then it gets debated at full board. Let me just play out the scenario of the six people responsible for the vote for the license choose Hudson Yards. We've said no because it doesn't fit with our, and I want to just emphasize again, I agree that the plan is baked, and I want what's supposed to go into Hudson Yards based on the zoning. We're putting out, are we allowing ourselves to even be considered as a partner for negotiation based on the state looking for direction on what to provide for this license is going to be issued somewhere. If they say yes to Hudson Yards, do we want to think about positioning ourselves to negotiate? And I'm just curious on that point, given our success on negotiation, of what people's reaction is to sort of that scenario. Joe, and then Leslie.
Or we need to tell our elected officials no right now and get them in the corner to turn it down, and they will negotiate on our behalf. The reason we don't have a stadium on the Western Rail Yards is our elected officials acted as one, and at the Public Authorities Control Board got the stadium voted down by the then Speaker of the Assembly and the Senate. That's what we did before. And if we want to have this again, we have to do it the same exact way. Hang together tough with our electeds and don't let them wiggle. If we don't, they will begin to think there's a deal to be made. And quite frankly, bluntly, our electeds today versus the ones then are not as strong. And we think about that very honestly. Just saying, Jeffrey.
Leslie, Joe, I'm asking for reactions on a scenario. Leslie?
Jeffrey, thank you. I agree with both Joe and Christine very strongly that, no, and I understand there's a plan. I understand it's already been meticulously drawn out. What I am afraid of is, though that plan is in place and that zoning's in place, the powers that be, when they look at all the areas they could do, they might look at us and say, this is not even built up yet. This is kind of like, I don't want to say it's an empty plot. It's not an empty plot, but there's room to build. You know what I mean? There's room that they can kind of wiggle and build, and I'm sure related, and they're going to do their whole PR machine to push that point. But I agree with Christine and Joe that I don't even think we should entertain it. And they're right. I mean, where is the school that was built, that's supposed to be built, that's in here? Where is this? Where is that? And I think that's really strong. I looked at CB5's letter, and I think Bert was asking, or someone was asking, what did they say the reason why they didn't want it? And they cited much different reasons than, we actually have zoning. They cited reasons like gambling is bad for you.
Yeah, we're not getting into the social issues this evening.
Right. No, I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. They brought up the social issues. I'm saying we have, I think, at least we have zoning, you know what I mean? We have a few pillars to stand on that other areas might not. And I think we should use that to our advantage.
Carrie?
I agree with Joe and Leslie and others about, no no negotiation. I also just want to mention that we're going to have a new EMS station on 28th Street. And I don't know what happens. I mean, there's no plan, obviously, but like, where is everybody parking? What's the traffic going to be like? Is that going to impede our, West Side EMS station getting the services out to the people that need them 1.5 blocks away? So I don't know if that's relevant, or we can make that argument as well.
JD?
Yeah, just to follow up on Carrie's point, a number of the block associations up here are taking up the issue. So I would assume there's going to be considerable concern expressed from the community, and that can influence our position and certainly influence the electeds, I would hope.
Marty?
I'm thinking, as I'm hearing the conversation, what's the first step in a long, we're all basically agreeing with each other in what you're saying, as I do as well. What's the first step in a long-term strategy? One of the things that came to my mind is the letter that you're talking about should be a letter of inquiry that says we are impatient to see the development on the Western Rail Yards. What's going on kind of letter.
Interesting. Thank you, Marty. Bert? Joe, your hand's up from earlier, I think, right? Sorry. Okay. I just want to make that. Bert?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that has been said, that we should reiterate what we have in place already. And in some way, I don't know if it's appropriate, looking at a wider city planning viewpoint, whatever that means nowadays, it really is not an appropriate place for a casino. Not that I'm, want to say that Community Board 5 is off the wall and Times Square is a more appropriate place for it. I wouldn't want to say that in a letter because, wouldn't want to say something about our colleagues like that. But I think we should say that this is not an appropriate place for a casino. What we have already zoned is what's appropriate. That there are other better places in the city for a casino.
Roberta?
Very tiny add. I certainly agree with the belief that there is existing zoning in place and that the state has already given related really substantial tax incentives to build community goods on that site. But there is little, if any, community benefit to siting a casino on this site. And if anything, particularly if it displaces things that are going to be community benefits, I think that should be in an initial letter. I think it's very reasonable to be concerned that there is little, if any at all, community benefit from the siting here. I think it's a really major issue.
Christine?
So when finally, the plan for Adams is to build more affordable housing, and our plan is to build more affordable housing. So maybe the message could be that, if there is anything change in the plan we have, is to add affordable housing to our district. And but that is the use we want. Emphasize, not a casino or anything else, because that's not what we want.
Just be careful that they don't say the casino will contribute millions and millions for that. Be very, very careful.
Yeah.
They'll sell it that way quick.
Right.
Because that's the current flavor of what people want.
Right.
Thank you, everybody, for indulging the discussion at 8:40 on a Monday evening. Any other new business?
So what's the next step?
Oh, a reminder. The next step is I took notes and have a bullet going, and we're going to debate whether or not this, I have to be honest, whether or not this goes on the February or March agenda, because February being on an off night, I'd want to get a poll of the committee, including myself. I haven't looked at the 22nd yet to kind of see. But this will be coming sort of through exec, I think initially is my thought. And so stay tuned for a draft. And obviously then what would be exec is just like any other committee. The public just doesn't often show up at it. So we would have this on the agenda and take it up like we would any other item.
Do we know the timeline for for that RFP and when?
I think it's in there. I think it was at least 3 to 4 months for response time.
Okay. And then once
I'll
the
double check.
response are in, that's when it goes to those committees, to the committees which are the elected officials?
I think so. We have a briefing coming up, so I'll ask
Right.
on that.
Would be good to know.
So Jeffrey, the draft letter is sort of a neutral letter, basically stating that there's already a plan for that and that needs to be implemented. Right?
That was exactly kind of the positioning, right? Like bring our position hard and fast to the top.
Right. So we're making a neutral position before we've heard from the larger community, but that's okay because we're just restating what we've already negotiated years ago, right?
Yeah.
But it's not before because you would hear it from the next meeting, right?
But I also think this is a topic where it's useful for me to have shared a draft letter with the committee and or the public, right? In advance of our
We can send it out when we send it out with the notice. If that
right.
Yep. The only other thing I will say is that I hope to see everybody in person on Thursday at the Maker's Space inside Chelsea Market. Enter on 16th Street. Jesse, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, it's time for dinner.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Yes, please. Thank you, Paul. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.